Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. In association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy. I'm your host, James Gardner, and this is a platform for the pros, by the pros. Passionate pros, organic dialogue. Let's chat. Thanks for listening. Let's roll. Scott is in the room. Ground rules before we get into the intro. This session is being recorded for the ever important purpose of solving the world's problems, one conversation at a time, and two, go back to as needed for those that wish. I certainly do on a regular basis. I have gone back after recording these and watched them the same night because I just get so fired up with some of the discussion. So please use the chat either by mic or typing it in to me or to the chat box. I will filter the conversation to Scott so he doesn't have to read the questions, but please feel free. Anything that pops up, please do ask. And away we go. Welcome to Let's Chat. This is session 13 already, an athletic therapy roundtable. We have Scott Livingston with us this evening. Scott is a designer of human and organizational performance solutions who's worked in the high-performance sports world for more than 30 years. As a performance coach, he's known for his dedication to building more efficient, effective, and resilient athletes. Scott has trained and rebuilt athletes at every level and has personally trained multiple Olympic and World Cup medalists. He worked for 11 seasons in the National Hockey League as an athletic therapist and strength and conditioning coach with the Montreal Canadiens, New York Rangers, and New York Islanders. He co-owns ReconditioningHQ, an educational business dedicated to teaching leading-edge practices in performance and reconditioning. His newest passion is his podcast, Leave Your Mark, where he interviews people from all walks of human performance, exploring their personal life stories. He is a dedicated and loving son, husband, father, and friend, and his purpose is to inspire people, create change, and challenge convention through his own example and mentorship. And that is Scott on a formal level. Anybody who's had a conversation with Scott, wow. What a guy, massive career, huge impact with every conversation that I've had with you, Scott. Scotty and I had a really good chat. I think it started really at a CATA conference I was presenting in Quebec City. That was the first time that we really got to talking. And I was presenting and you walked in and then Jamie walked in and then she ended up being the model on the table actually for one of the talks. And my heart and my mind just started spinning as soon as you guys walked in the room. I didn't quite know where I was going to go or what I was going to do. And then the dialogue started after that. And it was from there we kind of hit it off. And then we got back after it in between. Tried to have a reconditioning level 1 down here in the Bahamas. That didn't quite work out with some timing issues. That would have been amazing. And then last year's CATA conference really got down to it, sat at a table for dinner, and we all know how that goes at CATA conferences. So it was a good conversation there, and Scott and I have stayed in touch on a regular basis. Another mentor of mine from a distance, So Scott, if you just want to say hi to everybody, and then we'll jump right in, man. Really a pleasure having you. And I know you did a lab this afternoon, and I know you got a lot on the table. So really appreciate you taking the time out to say hi and to hang out with us tonight.
Yeah, truly appreciate being asked to be here, and we'll enjoy the conversation and questions, and let's have some fun. So thanks for inviting me, James.
You got it, man. Always fun and always conversation. Okay, so right off the bat, I want to talk to you about reading. Okay, I just finished the book, and I don't know if you've read this one. It's called Pete the Cat, Go Pete Go, and it's a turtle, and the turtle gets in a car and races against Pete the Cat, and Pete the Cat gets on a bicycle, and Pete the Cat doesn't care about winning. He just wants to do his best. And the turtle wants to race and put his tires on and his fins and zoom around the curves. And at some point he gets mag tires. I don't even know what those are. But Pete the Cat takes the curves and takes his apple, eats his apple, smells the roses. So this is kind of the inspiration for talking to you, man. You've really inspired me to stop and smell the roses and really enjoy the process. And this is a book I just finished reading for bedtime before I came down here. And yeah, man. So what are you, I don't know if you've read that one, but what have you been reading lately?
That's a beautiful one. That makes me think about actually one of my inspiration statements to myself is turtle power. It's my business inspiration statement. So my father said to me many years ago, you know, my brother was the hare and I was the tortoise. And my brother's like this frenetic, crazy guy when we were younger, and I was the guy who just kind of plodded along and made things happen, and you know, very slowly. And so it's become my moniker in a way. I just kind of go about my business, doing my thing. And what have I been reading lately? I mean, you know, I'm always reading stuff just to sort of inspire me and to clarify, you know, through other people's experiences, other ways of seeing things. I think we, you know, never really are finished our journey at any point on this earth, and we can always sort of expand and grow. And I do most of my reading, other than technical reading, around just growing as a person, a human being, and understanding things like mindset more, and understanding the influences and philosophical things of life. So those are the things I'm inspired by, and I like to read. So that's me in a nutshell, as they say in my little box.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And man, I don't know. I think every time I pick something up, I think of you. So I had this thought last night. I know I sent you a quote that I wanted to sort of just have you have it marinate with you before we got on this evening, and I'll read that so everybody can be aware of what that was. But I don't know. I had this thought last night. I think of like you know, King Midas, that everything he touched turned to gold. I'm in this place right now where everything I read, I just keep coming back to you, man. And you recommended the Altus Performance Therapy, and wow, what a deep path. And I am just taking it so slowly and just absorbing it and loving every second of it. Once we're back in Canada, I'm going to get to, I haven't actually done your course, but I'm obviously going to do that at some point and get out to see you guys. But that Altus Performance has a lot of references to you in it. Steve Livstone was on last week. He referenced you. We've had a bunch of really, really good dialogue, and a lot of it comes back around to you. That career, not that it's anywhere close to over, but you've had a ton of dialogue, a ton of interaction, and a ton of impact, I'm sure. Who are the people that inspire you or continue to inspire you right now?
There's a lot of them, and I'm blessed to be able to call them friends in a lot of ways. And that's part of the selfish passion project of doing Leave Your Mark is, you know, reaching out to people I've been inspired by maybe just circuitously or through influence on the World Wide Web, and being able to ask them if we can sit and speak for an hour and getting to know them better. And there's, you know, a myriad of different professionals who've really influenced me over my life. More lately, I think I have, you know, a group of people that I tap into fairly regularly, and we've been doing some, as you mentioned earlier, reconditioning learning labs, Zoom labs, and I, you know, had Stu McMillan, who runs Altus, come in and chat. And Stu and I actually got off to a rocky start in our relationship early on, kind of misinterpreted viewpoints of actually two guys who actually think quite similarly. And we've grown to respect each other and enjoy each other's company. And he's a real big thinker, and his operational paradigm of knowledge across so many different spectrums is really impressive. And he's the guy who's written most of that performance therapy course, and you can tell, the way he writes and thinks, it's quite inspiring, actually. And he's a guy who really pushes me. I love running into and connecting with Dan Paff, Jerry Ramagita. A lot of the guys that are at Altus are quite impressive people. I just interviewed Jazz Radwana, who is a Canadian who used to work with Basketball Canada. Really enjoyed chatting with him. He's a real cerebral thinker. Jeremy Shepard out of the Canadian Sports Center Pacific is an incredibly impressive human being. Gotten to know him quite well over the last few years. He's a part of an Empower You group that my wife and I do that we have a lot of fun with, and he's always inspiring and a real light. Had Matt Jordan on today. Matty Jordan is a very impressive person as well. And then, over my career, guys like Gray Cook and Mark Verstegen and Stu McGill and all these guys that I've had the pleasure and honor of either working around with, connecting to, etc. They've all influenced my career, the way I think, my thought paradigms. Next week we have a guy, Damian Maroney, who's a really talented physio strength coach works for 40 Sport, is an incredible person as well. So I've had a real blessed career, blessed opportunities to meet people and to talk to people, and I continue to try to expand that. Had a really cool legendary podcast conversation yesterday morning with three guys it was a really cool conversation, actually. I had three guys who were in Australia and two were in the UK. And so I was up at 7 a.m. and these guys in the UK were at 12, and it was 9 p.m. for the guys in Oz. And we were just chatting about all things performance sport. And, all these guys were therapists, strength coaches, kind of talking about that, interconnectedness and integrated practice. So that's a long-winded answer for who influenced me. There's lots of different influences in my career.
Yeah, without a doubt, and I think everybody on here is writing down most of those names, and there's some redundancy in terms of those names that you brought up, and obviously Steve Lidstone was on last week, and he was talking about how influential you were as his mentor and taking him under your wing, and he talked about Mark and Exos and Altus and all these things as well. So it's nice to hear the echoing thoughts. It's also nice to get this sort of trickle down effect of Canadians that that everybody keeps touching on. Sometimes we feel like we have to go to the US, or we have to go across international borders to find really, really quality thinkers and practitioners. And there's so many right within the borders of Canada that are either Canadian and supplanted elsewhere or Canadian in Canada. So nice to hear that. And I think that's kind of part of the mission for me in doing these chats, of sort of following in your footsteps, but during these times where everybody's sort of holed up and can't really get the connection, this is a really great platform to connect and have some of the younger thinkers or some of the newer practitioners and intermesh with some of us mediocre practitioners, and then some that have been in the game a long time. And I meant that completely, like in my skill set, not in the time that I've been doing this. I'd say mediocre as well for the time that I've been doing this. But yeah, it's been a really good platform, really cool to interact, and a great answer. So no answer from you is ever too long or too short. It's exactly what it needs to be. So I'll just keep stroking your ego this whole evening so you can sleep easily after that. All right.
Well, I was actually going to pull off of what you just said with the Canadian piece, because, I think that's something that, your audience should honor and actually resonate with. I assume most of the people on here are Canadian. Maybe there's some people from other countries, but one of the neat things about Canadian practitioners is that I've noticed over the years is, I've been talking a lot recently of sort of the difference between sort of vertical and specific, specialist-oriented development and generalist or horizontal development. And Canadians tend to be more comfortable with that horizontal profile and sort of growing both, their specific understanding, but also getting to know and understanding. I think we're a little bit more empathetic society in general. And So I think in some sense, that's one of our strengths as practitioners. And I think I would recommend to everybody that the more diverse you can become and the more multi-thinking and multifactorial you can become, the better you can see solution sets for problems. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't specialize. I think specialization is very important especially for clarifying and understanding, a particular topic that you might be interested in or area of understanding. But that generalist or horizontal acumen gives you a lot of power when it comes to solving problems, and that's kind of the business that we're all into to a degree.
Yeah, and huge. And the nice part about having you on after I've had some other people on and some other people after some other people is these common threads, this interconnectedness and the multifactorial thinking and the collaborative approach to professionalism and to developing human beings or athletes or clients or whatever. And so it's a really nice thread that's really been woven in really, really organically. Everybody touches on it. And we've had all people that and Scott Howitt was on, and he talked about a lot of these things. Steve Lidstone, obviously, again last week, and then back through the coaches we've had on, the practitioners that we've had on that have been in Canada and left, and what a massive undertaking Canadians have. And I think there's also like some humility to Canadians in general too, right? Like very humble. There's not necessarily all the time the flash and like that you need to read this and you need to see this and this is the person you have to follow because most people are following them. Like there's a level of humility, and everybody we've had on here has said sort of the same things, but the Canadian content is massive in the performance world, and this network just seems to be growing and growing and growing. So really cool that you would touch on that. Hey, before I forget, are you watching Tiger King or no?
I watched 15 minutes of the first show, and there's a part of me that says I should watch it, and another part of me that says no, I shouldn't watch. I'm watching Last Dance right now. That's pretty good.
This is unanimous so far. The Last Dance is unanimous, and I'm gonna lean that to no for Tiger King. I'm running basically an ongoing scoreboard here, so that'll be 6. I think no just took the lead actually, so that's gonna be 6 yes to 7 no. And at the same time, I just put in the quiz for tonight. I hope so. If you can follow that, if you want these CEUs, feel free. Otherwise, you can email me and get that. Yeah, so that's great. I'm with you. I haven't jumped in. I have since the last time, just in case anybody cares. I have started The Last Dance. I've fallen asleep twice and had to go back and start the episode over again. So I'm at episode, I think 1.5, 2, something like that. But yeah, what a journey that was. Unbelievable. You touched on like the paradigm of thought, and for me, what's really shifted in me is that. I feel like, and maybe it's for everybody, but I feel like when you're younger or just coming out, or maybe for younger people, some people get it a lot earlier. For me, I'm a late bloomer altogether. I just freaking start to figure things out when I get old and have a kid or something like that. I don't know. But the paradigm of thought versus like the certificate and the pats on the back, you know what I mean? Like really shifting into how I'm thinking about things and why I'm doing things and what I value becomes a whole lot, or has become a whole lot more elevated for me of late. And that started with some really differential reading, like getting outside of the practice and tying in paradigms of thought from Altus and like from some of these things, from like some Buddhist stuff, some stuff where it just like changed me altogether in terms of my approach. Not that certificates are bad or courses for CEUs are bad, but you talk about the paradigm of thought. And I'm just going to read the quote that I sent to you, and then I'll put it up on the screen because I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this for everybody to sort of hear. So if I can request, just sort of, you don't have to close your eyes, but just really dial into the words and let it sit with you. And then Scotty, I want to take your take on this, and we'll jump right in. A friend of mine sent this to me the other day, and I had to send this to Scott again, like. Coincidental timing that isn't coincidental. Having Scott on this evening, this came to me. So here it was. I'm delighted that the future is unsure. That's the way it should be. Some of life's richest moments are the most unexpected. The old friend met by chance, or the new one discovered when neither of us were really looking. The toy at the bottom of the toy box, rediscovered and loved anew. The book, the flower, the shaft of light we were in the right place at the right time to notice and embrace. It is important to dream and plan, to work toward goals, to mark the milestones we pass on life's journey. No less important, though, is to open ourselves to the unexpected joys awaiting us every day. Am I ready today to expect the unexpected? And that one I've been listening in on you guys when you're doing the live stuff on Instagram. I've been trying to follow as closely as I can. And I know this one sort of, at least for me, I was like, Scott's coming on, and this is exactly like kind of it. This is where my thought has been for the last little while. You read it, and I don't know, what do you think? This is very much it. Expect the unexpected, live for now. And I think these times have highlighted it too, a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting it's an interesting quote and idea to sort of contemplate. It's part of my journey that I've gone through with doing the podcast, is to sort of reflect on life. And one of the reasons why I started it was that I wanted to spend time sort of talking to other people about their journey. And what I've come to sort of conclude over time is that, we can't really fast forward life. We go through sort of phases, and they're natural progressive phases in our lives that in some ways we need to go through in order to recognize the things that are in front of us and the value of the moments. And so I think when you're younger, it's natural that you sort of go through the process of exploring the possibilities and what your vocation might be, and you get very focused in that. And then life starts to shift a little bit depending upon relationships and how you explore that part of your life, whether you start to have a family or you don't, and the types of jobs that you get and responsibilities that you have. And I think there's a really good TED Talk that I would recommend anybody listen to. I'm not a massive Anthony Robbins fan, but I believe he really has done some excellent work in his time, and he does a TED Talk that's about 25 minutes long, which he self-admits at the beginning of is very difficult for him because his seminars are usually 3 days long. So he basically talks about what are the fundamental 6 needs of the human psyche or system. And he calls the first 4 needs of the personality, and the last 2 are needs of the spirit. And fundamentally, all of us have these needs of the personality. There's certainty, uncertainty, significance, and relationship or connection, love. And then the other 2, which are the needs of the spirit, are growth and contribution. And he, in a roundabout way, he talks about the fact that the first 4 needs, they're natural, that we want to have some level of significance. We want to sort of mean something to people. We want to connect with people. Love is an important thing. Our connection is an important thing. But what he sort of fundamentally explains in it is that they're kind of like buckets with a hole in the bottom, and you can keep pouring water into them, but you'll never really feel a sense of fulfillment or satisfaction from those. And that the ones that really at the end of the day will fulfill you are your personal growth and your contribution on this earth. So, it takes a while for us in our process of life development and wherever you are in that spectrum to kind of start to recognize that. And I think there's a natural recognition point as you get into your late 30s and 40s that maybe you should start looking at these things. And then when you get to my age, when you're in your 50s and 60s, I think there's a real factorial contemplation phase around that, where you kind of look back and go, why am I doing, or why did I do what I did? But I think no matter where you are in that stage of progression in life, if you can start to recognize that a lot of these things that we go out and do are really to satisfy these buckets of certainty or uncertainty, or the big one is significance. And so you'll look at things like doing your master's degree or your PhD, or doing this certification or that course, or getting that job, or what have you. All very natural progressions. But if you fundamentally recognize why you're doing them versus getting them because you think you need to get them to be recognized, or to arrive, or to make it, or to, that's one of the things I've fundamentally realized in my life is you never actually arrive. There's no such thing. You're on the job that makes you think, oh, I made it. You're not going to buy the car that makes you think I made it. You're not going to get the house that makes you. You're not going to have the X number of children that are. You don't. There is no make it. At the end of the day, you're doing these things because they are contributing to your inner growth. And if you're connected to why you're doing, then you grow exponentially from it. But fundamentally, I think a lot of times we don't necessarily connect to the why. We're kind of running out trying to get them, and then we get them, and they're not as satisfactory as or fulfilling as we would have wanted them to be, and there's sort of an emptiness or another need to get something else. And so, if you can, no matter where you are in that journey, spend a little bit more time recognizing why you're doing something, and I think in speaking to this group, things like taking your master's or doing your PhD. I had a great conversation with Matt Jordan today, who's probably one of the brightest strength conditioning people in Canada. And if you've never met or run into Matt, I highly recommend spending some time with him or watching or listening to him or learning from him. But, he's done his master's and now he's a doctor. He's done his PhD and he's in his mid-40s, just finished his PhD. He's got 3 kids. But to listen to him understand why he did it and what it meant to him and he did it for the right reasons because of his curiosity and wanting to satisfy a need to really truly understand and to learn the reflective practice that he needed to learn and to connect with people who are higher thinkers and things, rather than just doing it because somebody says you have to do it in order to get this job or to do this thing or something. And then you just check the box, but you don't really recognize the purpose value of doing it. And I think that's I think the main point from my perspective is understanding that why. And if you ever have the chance to read the book, Start with the Why by Simon Sinek. It's a fabulous book. At this point, I would imagine most people have, but if you haven't, I recommend reading it or watching his TED Talk, because that understanding of why you do something is fundamental. And that's where we start with in our reconditioning process as well. So
yeah.
Again, I babbled on for a while there. So
you just keep going. I'm not even going to interject anything. You just go over. I'll just sit here. We'll just sit here. Everybody really appreciates listening to you and having you here, and for everybody in the room as well, appreciate you taking the time out to be here. But you touch on so many good things, and I kind of highlighted this idea, this quote that I heard from a doctor who does a lot of psych work out at USC, and he talks about happiness and how happiness can't be achieved. You have to cultivate it from within. You can't chase things around, because once you get those things, you just want more things, and you're only so happy for a couple seconds, a couple minutes, a couple years, and then you're moving on to the next thing. So this idea of greater depth of the journey and the process versus the end result is so huge, and I've had a really unique opportunity to work with a demographic here that I never worked with before. And that's, anywhere from kids all the way up to teenagers getting ready to go to college or to university. And I've just tried to impart that a little bit here and there without jamming it down their throats. Because I think the earlier we can recognize those things in life, the better off this universe, this planet is, with human beings that are recognizing the value of connectedness and these kinds of things. And I was reading this really cool book last night that I couldn't put down. I ended up going too far into it and then got caught. I don't know. Anyway, and it was just talking about, spending time in the insula, of your brain. So the insula is the area that really lights up with human connectedness and empathy and in a really visceral way. And what an amazing opportunity to listen to you highlight that on such a deep level and so humbly. Amazing stuff. Really, really good stuff. But let's shift gears a little bit away from that. But the books you mentioned, all of those things, I'll make sure that I put up in the discussion section on the YouTube channel when I post the video. And Steve down here has posted in the chat as well, the YouTube, which I'm assuming is the Tony Robbins one. Otherwise, probably a really good video. It might be Tiger King. I don't know, but it's down there. So Steve can confirm what that is. You spent a lot of time in hockey. So let's go there for a little while. When were you with the Islanders? Were you there? Because I tried to go back and find out when you were there. Were you there when they had the best logo in the history of the NHL? The one, the cartoon with the Darkwing Duck and the lighthouse? I loved that logo. Everybody hated it.
I actually came the year after that when they actually went back to their roots and went back to their old school uniforms. If you ever have a chance to watch the show ESPN 30 on 30 when they talk about, there's one that runs over the period where this guy basically duped the New York Islanders organization into believing that he had enough money to buy the team. And he spent most of the year sort of faking that he was rich enough to own it and driving in on limos and spending his time up in the box, et cetera, et cetera. And then they realized that he was kind of penniless and had sort of figured out a way to swindle everybody. Well, the next year, another owner bought the team, and that was the year that I got to work or got my first job in the National Hockey League. And to paint the portrait of disappointment in my first year in the league and what I thought the professional hockey was going to be and what it ended up being was the biggest fiasco and zoo and gong show I've ever seen in my life. Like I got my job. Well, I flew down to get the interview. I did the interview with a guy named Elliot Pellman, was the chief physician. If you ever watched the movie Concussion, Elliot Pellman is the physician in the movie Concussion who is the chief internist for the National Football League, but he was also the head physician for the Islanders. And he was the guy that basically shouldn't have been, covering up all the stuff that was going on with concussions. I find out now. But anyways, I interviewed with Elliot and a bunch of other people, and then they offered me the job, and I was one of 16 guys that of the strength coaches at the interview could actually skate. So they gave me the job. So I was there on a Friday, and he said, when can you be ready to work? And I said, maybe 2 weeks, give me 2 weeks. And he said, we need you here on Monday. So I went back 2 weeks to training camp, went back home, came back. We went to Lake Placid to run a training camp that was supposed to be 7 days long. And the first day I was there, the general manager phoned all of us who were setting up camp and said that the owner was pulling out of the lease at the stadium, and that we all had to come back and move all the furniture out of the building, every stick of furniture, every piece of equipment. Went back, moved it all out, went back up to Lake Placid and ran a training camp for 21 days instead of 7 days. And the whole time I was there, they were telling us we were going to play all our games away. So that was the start of the Gong Show. And that was my year. Zdeno Chara was a rookie. And now he's early 40s and has been in the league for 27 years. So that tells you how long that's been. And our captain was Trevor Linden, but Trevor Linden held out at the beginning of the season. And they had this superstar named Ziggy Palffy that if anybody's a hockey person might know Ziggy, but Ziggy was a really good hockey player. Small anecdote about Ziggy was for 2 years in a row, he's the kind of guy who just didn't give a shit, but was so talented. And so 2 years in a row, he had a bonus structure where you get $250,000 if he scored 45 goals. And I was there the second year. The first year, at the last game of the season, he had to get 3 goals, and he scored 3 to get his bonus. And the year I was there, needed to do it again, and he scored 3 goals to get his bonus. So interesting characters that I met in my first year.
Oh man, life.
Some hockey stories. There you
go. Yeah. Life in the fast lane, right? The world of professional sports that we all dream of being in.
Yeah, exactly.
You end up seeing some pretty.
Be careful what you ask for.
You got it exactly.
The conversation I had with Matt Price tonight, who's the strength conditioning coach for the Los Angeles Kings, and the Gong Show that the NHL is going to try to create now to play in COVID is quite interesting. We can dial into that one if you want to later on.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think it's so interesting because everybody who's been with the pro team has had some little tidbit about, having to help out and doing those things. And, I think, Dan Church, who's the women's hockey coach at York University and was with the women's national team for a little while. And he talked about, packing the bags on the bus and making sure that it trickles all the way across. And I said this last time, trickles down, but it trickles all the way across. It's more horizontal than it is up and down. You're right, completely. So it trickles all the way across the bus where the equipment manager, the student therapist, the bus driver, the captain, the assistant captain, everybody chips in and does their part. And that makes the ship go a whole lot smoother no matter the weather outside, right? Yeah.
Well, listen. I don't know if you wanted me to make a comment on that, but I mean it doesn't matter what league you get to. you know, the show, first of all, you're in an entertainment industry, and everybody chips in to manage that entertainment structure. And, you know, performance is an important part of it, but it's it's in a secondary reality in comparison to the show must go on. And so you know, you have to do what you have to do to be a part of the team and to have team success. And fundamentally, you know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, and I actually wrote a post about that the other day, about the red shiny sports car. And I think some people think that pro sports is kind of like getting the nice red shiny Ferrari that you know you're going to have arrived. And fundamentally, you know, there are perks. Don't get me wrong. And I look back on my 11-year career like I shouldn't have done it, or it was a waste of time? Or absolutely not. It was a phenomenal experience, and I can tell stories for hours if you want to about all the different things that I did in that time. But at the same time, one has to recognize that it is not, you know, it's not what people think it is. You aren't going there and kind of living la vida loca all the time, and you know, kind of hanging with the big boys and the parties and all the other stuff that's going on. You work for the team. The athletes are the show. You have to make sure that show runs. You have to work many hours. You know, if you actually get down to the brass tacks of, look, you know, you make a good salary, sometimes less than one would expect you make. And when you dial it down to the number of hours that you spend on a yearly basis doing it, you probably don't make as much money as you think you do. You fundamentally are really married to the organization. I used to probably get about 4 days off a season that I actually knew I was going to get off. The rest of the time, you're basically wondering if you're going to get them off or not. And I think between the time which I finished in the league, 2009, and now, it's become even more business-like in the sense that if you're, say, a strength and conditioning coach or therapist, there really is very little time off now because there's so many camps in the summer, so many things going on. And it's pretty much like that in every league. You know, I have friends who are in the NFL and the NBA, and it's a very demanding world. So, you know, if you're somebody who really wants to have a family and wants to be a family connected person, it's a more difficult aspiration to have. That being said, you know, I wouldn't turn I always spent time with some of the younger people who've worked under me, who now work in professional sports, telling them so that they would have their eyes wide open when they go into it. And going back to the point that I made before, if you know why you're doing it, then have at it. You know, like if it's satisfying, a sense of fulfillment that you're part of a team and that you're contributing to the greater, possibilities of winning a championship or et cetera, then go for it. And recognize that you may be there. I was there for 11 years, 3 different teams, never won a championship. I know guys, a good friend of mine is the head therapist for the New York Rangers, who I worked with for a couple of years. Jim Ramsey, has been in the league for 27 years, never won a cup.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can be there for a long time and never win the championship. So, you know, you need to have the right set of aspirations and raison d'etre for being and doing it, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And it's great to hear that. And it's great for some of the younger people and some of the people that are in pro sport that acknowledge that. And I was there in the minor leagues, you know, and got to spend a little bit of time, a week here, a week there with the big league club when we were all minor league trainers. We had a really great staff, an integrated staff where they'd bring over each minor league trainer into the major league spring training, or I was lucky enough to be from Toronto. So when I come back at the end of the season in Lansing or Auburn, New York, they'd say, why don't you come down, help us with the big league team for a week in Toronto. So that was really cool. But and there's so much that you get out of working in pro sport. There's no doubt about that. But you touch on some of the other realities of it too. And then you bring up the red sports car. You had to bring up a red sports car. So it's like I always think about this when you go to buy. It's like going to buy a new car, you know, and you go to buy a new car and you're like, I'm gonna get that one because it's red and I like the shape of it and I haven't seen it anywhere else, you know. And then you get in it and you buy it and you start driving it around, and then every freaking person has the same red car. It's amazing. You just never had your eyes open enough to recognize it. Yeah, it's a crazy little thing. But you also talk about like the impact you can have and sort of playing, I don't want to say second fiddle, but the athletes are definitely the number one when it comes to pro sports, especially at the top level and these kinds of things from an entertainment standpoint. We've talked a little bit about the space for athletic therapy at the amateur level, you know, and where there's a whole lot of room. I feel in my time, I've kind of gone I don't know. I used to think I went in reverse, or I started at the top and I went backwards, but I kind of did it the other way. You know, I started out right out of school in pro sport, and then I went to university, and then I've now worked with like youth who are, you know, some are athletes, some are not, and some are or identify as athletes, and some are not, and the younger population and teachers and professionals who are human beings, you know, and I think there's so much more opportunity for creativity and autonomy within practice, you know, as a conditioning coach or as a person who works with other human beings, as opposed to athletes, you know. Do you feel like there's a lot more room for athletic therapy in Canada? Because I know you are an athletic therapist as well. For this profession to continue to grow and to impact on a greater scale in the amateur level?
Yeah, I mean, I will bifurcate that in two parts. One is, you know, I think I read a great quote one time that, you know, success is the pursuit of a worthy ideal. So fundamentally, I think if we understand that what we're in understanding our success, it doesn't have to do with attaining the shiny red sports car or getting the job in the NHL or whatever it is. It's, are you pursuing a worthy ideal, and what is that within the scope of your heart? So if you enjoy working with young people and seeing them bloom and grow, if you enjoy the opportunity to help somebody achieve something that they didn't think they could achieve, whatever it is that you know really that you can pursue and you can put your fulsome heart into at whatever level it is, it doesn't have anything to do with what salary you make or what the title of the job is or what the logo on the company is or whatever. It's, are you doing something that fulfills you uniquely inside? So if you're doing that, you know, coming back to the other part of that question, which is, does athletic therapy, you know, can athletic therapy play a part in younger development athletics and sport? I think if I look back at the history of the profession, and, you know, I've had a couple of some real pioneers, Ann Hartley on Leave Your Mark recently, Dexter Nelson, Glenn Bergeron, these are, you know, some of the people who really started the CATA as we know it now.
Yeah.
You know, these, when I look back at them and then my generation and future generations, you know, it used to be that you only saw athletic therapists with professional sports back when the association started, and then it was universities. And when I sort of came in Canada, fundamentally, if you didn't get a job at a university or you didn't get a job, sort of a pseudo job at a clinic, and that was kind of very spotty as well back in the day, you weren't getting a job in athletic therapy. And then, you know, all of a sudden we started to see, and that's when I started in my professionally, there were no certified ATs in the National Hockey League. That, you know, most of the guys were, you know, grandfathered in trainers who never got their certification, etc. And there was a huge mandate in the late 80s, early 90s where, you know, that kind of started to shift. Now pretty much every team, well, the league rule is that there's 2 ATs for every team. Now you have ATs at the NHL level, the AHL level, the East Coast level. You know, you've got people working in junior hockey developed while I was through the 2000s. You know, so to your point, that is a metamorphosis over time of the value proposition of those people being involved. People understanding that, you know, young people get injured too and need support. And it's funny sometimes, maybe it's kind of the reverse psychology reality, but where we should have our best people working both in strength conditioning, therapy, etc., in our development culture, we usually have our more you know, neophyte professionals doing that. And that's really, you know, where we should be sort of implicating great people who know how to move well and get the kids moving well and have good experiences in their rehab, etc., so that they don't have problems that I've spent a lifetime fixing when, you know, the athletes in their mid-20s. So.
Yeah, awesome. We've touched on this with with a couple people at least, and it's almost like this inversion of the way things are done, right? In baseball, it's very much like you have the highest salary and the longest tenured professionals with the guys who already know what they're doing and what their routines are and how their body works, because they've been in the league playing for so long in their careers and they're established. And down in the bottom, you have, fresh graduates, people trying to certify and these kinds of things that may not be established, but that's where we can have the most impact. So you bring it up, and it's nice to hear. I think that there's a trending shift coming, and then there's a bunch of people on here that we've had dialogue after each one of these sessions, talking about it and really making some connections, and whether it takes off now or in a couple of years, I think there's a lot of passion and drive, and I really keep going back to the fact that, like, personal trainers and strength and conditioning coaches are so highly utilized, but there's no coverage for them. So where the argument keeps coming back around, oh, I'm an athletic therapist, but nobody has coverage in their insurance, it doesn't really come down to that as an issue if you're if you're creating and offering the things that I feel like athletic therapists truly can offer when you've established yourself and you've done a lot of good education and networked and created things that you need to create to offer, right?
Well, you touched on a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart, actually. And, one of my mission statements, and Jamie, my beautiful wife, amazing wife, is mission statement is as well. And I excuse my language, everybody, fucking hate the fact that we always talk about insurance. Like, you don't have to earn your living off an insurance paradigm. Like, my wife is probably one of the best AT strength coaches in Canada at what she does from a reconditioning standpoint. And she could probably count on two hands in the last 10 years the number of people who actually used insurance to pay her. Like, fundamentally, what we do and why we believe in reconditioning, and I'm not here to sell reconditioning, just the belief in what we use as exercise and fundamentally having a broader perspective on what you do and what you can contribute. I don't think you have to be married to insurance. I think being married to insurance is a weakness in our strategy. And fundamentally, I think if you make people better movers and healthier movers, they're going to pay you for your services. I mean, let's face it, they go out and pay personal trainers who in a lot of cases don't have anywhere near the educational profile that many of the people on this call have. They'll pay them 60, 70, 80 bucks an hour, but then we're trying to fight to get somebody to pay us 35, 40 bucks an hour in a clinic to treat. So I don't get that. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I think fundamentally, if you broaden, go back to that horizontal belief system, make sure you have, lots of acumen in a lot of different ways, and you can take somebody through a full process of getting back to where they need to get to. You'll never be bored. That's for sure.
Yeah. Nobody can say it any better than you. And so I'm glad I'm not the only one that heard that. And as we get ready to move back to Canada, I have some plans. Some of them involve you. I haven't told you about them yet, but and I'm very much looking forward to sort of like navigating this. And this is a whole new thing. It's like, used to be scared about that. Like, how am I going to make money? How am I going to find a job? Well, I feel now that, like, with experiential learning, these kinds of discussions, connectedness, networks that continue to grow through these discussions and other means, and education that's really had meaning in terms of my output. And I'm saying me, but I mean basically anybody who's on this call is in a similar boat. We keep coming back to the same reasons, and I think they're all the right reasons. And so as a profession, I started these with an AT bias, because that's who I am and what I am. Well, not who I am, but what I am as a practitioner, as a professional. And I really wanted to grow some awareness organically, having these dialogues and having these discussions out there for our profession and for the country and across borders makes a difference. And hearing stuff like this from you and from everybody who's been on, athletic therapist or not, I think goes a long way. We've had the opportunity to really connect some people who haven't been connected in the past, never even knew each other before, and are now doing some things through various channels, internships, dialogue, just discussions, things like that just sort of, they came up very naturally just through this platform, and it's been really, really cool to see. And that's where I don't know. That's my left prefrontal cortex now. This is where, like, enthusiastic and engaged in doing all this stuff and having all these things, right? I'm reading about the brain since I talked to Katie Mitchell, was on here talking neuroscience and all kinds of stuff. But it's really difficult to be unhappy when you're curious, right? I think that's a really bold statement, but I think it's there.
That's for sure. I mean, curiosity I think, is a staple of life that, you know, especially if you're going to be in athletic therapy as a profession moving forward, or any variation therein. You have to be curious. If you're not, I think your career is going to be a real short one, or not particularly impressive. But at the end of the day, like I was going to say, I think sometimes we become a little bit too attached to titles and to words. I think the word athletic therapy, you should be proud of having attained that and achieved that. And I'm certainly proud of my heritage as an athletic therapist, but I think it's at the end of the day, it's a means to an end of things that you want to do to support outcomes for the people that you work with. And you're going to accumulate a lot of different knowledge paradigms from a lot of different angles and places, and you're going to accumulate your style of practice, whatever that might be. And I don't think you should allow yourselves to be so attached to the professional terminology. I think that's a weakness sometimes, that we get attached too much to that. I think certainly we should be proud of our profession, but don't be attached to it as an identity position, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and then a lot of the times, when a lot of the discussions when I was in the university setting was always like, okay, well, how do you differentiate yourself, you know, as an athletic therapist from like a physio? And I always kind of hated that discussion. I was like, well, if you're comparing me to, anyway, won't go down that road, but you're exactly right. It's sort of like removing the identity and sort of puffing up the chest. And I think back in Quebec, maybe in 2018. Certainly 2018 and then 2019 at the CATC conferences, I feel like I made a bit of an ass of myself at the time, but now looking back, like I'm really happy that I sort of stood at the front of these small little seminar rooms and just said, like, we need to be a little less Canadian and just sort of puff up our chests a little bit more and be really proud of what it is that we do. And then we talk about like characteristics of a therapist, and as you adjust and get the lighting in the back, I think like adaptability is huge for therapists. Let's go down that road, man. In terms of human performance and strength coach, AT, chiropractor, whatever your title, we can throw that away. What characteristics do you think really make you know, people in the human performance world successful?
Well, I think you hit on one: curiosity, empathy, compassion, and those are, you know, they're similar but dissimilar in many ways, but I think they're both very important. You have to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, in your client's shoes, and you also have to have, you know, real compassion for them, and recognize what it is that they're going through and dealing with. Integrity, I think, is a huge piece. I think integrity is a huge piece for every human being, but I think sometimes that word gets used and people don't really understand what it means. And fundamentally, integrity is really, you know, what you value and the link to your behaviors. So, you know, do you value X and then behave in alignment with those values, or do you do these things but say you believe in this stuff? So fundamentally, I think if you believe in this, your goal is to try to behave to link towards those behaviors. There's always a fundamental integrity gap. I don't think anybody is perfect in this world. We all make our mistakes and do things that we shouldn't do. But fundamentally, if you're working towards a set of values and you understand what those values are, then your behavior should link to them and should you know, I guess, be recognizable in what it is that you value. So you behave in a certain way, I should almost be able to recognize what your values are by the way that you behave. I think that those are sort of really fundamental big ones. Work ethic is a huge one, but I think work ethic is big for just about any professional, you know, profession on the planet if you want to be successful. And I think when you look at work ethic, there was an equipment manager I used to work with. He used to always say, "Work smarter, not harder." And you know, I think there is a bit of a link to that. You want to work hard, but I think you don't just want to get on the treadmill and crush yourself. You want to work with purpose, with an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, and being connected to that really in many different ways. And I think over time, that can come from your mindset connection, your spiritual connection, your your intellectual connection, your philosophical connection, all that you can explore as you grow and develop over life. But it's important to have those recognition points. I'm going to find some more light so I don't look like I'm in the darkness, but try not to keep my daughter awake as she's going to bed now. So what's the best way to stand here and where the light gets me more light? There you go. Trying to stay warm and get light.
Yeah, well, I mean, do those things. Drink a little bit more wine. I saw some empty wine glasses over there. You may want to fill those ones up. That helps.
I have my Hello Kitty blanket on, so I'm good.
It's cute. It's very cute.
That's what you get when you have a daughter.
That's it. Hey, Hello Kitties for everyone these days,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you talk about value systems, and there's a lot of stuff out there now, and you talk about start with the why, and everything that Brene Brown talks about right now is very trendy, and all these kinds of things in terms of living by the value system and not getting too broad with what your value system is, but sort of narrowing it down to however many is catchy or however many make sense, 2 or 3 values that you really, really want to carry and live by. And we've experienced it in lots of different areas, in the education system and in the professional sports world and amateur sports. You see these things, and it's really easy to find when a value system is almost like projected onto you, either as an employee or somebody that's in an environment, but not actually being lived by the leadership. And I think that falls on, it really helps. It really, what's the equation? I guess it would equate to sort of losing the room, in when it comes to sports, when the coach is constantly screaming, yelling, or not, the room kind of gets lost if it's not lived, on a day-to-day when it comes to values. Mm-hmm. I just grabbed a book from behind me because I don't know, it's just random, but it was here. And it's like stuff like this, working with difficult people. It doesn't necessarily apply to every situation, but like outside of your realm, like just picking stuff up and just like other ways to deal with people and handle situations, and just kind of just to keep the tires moving. I just found so much value in that. But you touch on so many great things. Coming back around to hockey, so you were with the Highlanders and then the Canadians, which must have been like a dream for you, right? Like, I mean, you were a little eyes wide open, but you had been in the league for a little while before going there. How was the time in Montreal? And then I'm just going to sidebar. Anybody who has any questions directly for Scott on hockey or any of the things that we've touched on, feel free to type them in here down either to me or to everybody, and I'll get to them. But Montreal and then New York, or New York and then Montreal.
I worked for the Islanders for a year, and then I switched teams, got away from the nightmare that was the Islanders, and to my point about Jim Ramsey, got opportunity to go work for the Rangers for a couple of years, and that was the year after Wayne Gretzky retired. And my second year with the team was the year Mark Messier came back to be captain with the team. That was in season 2000, 2001. And, one of my great personal recollections of hockey was the opportunity in pre-training camp to go and play shinny hockey with a whole bunch of the guys, and my line mates were Mark Messier and Brian Leach. So that was a really cool experience or opportunity.
Not too many people can say that, I don't think.
No, that was a neat moment. So, I worked for them for 2 years, then lost my job. I will always remember Glenn Sather, who had basically the GM that hired me got fired after my first year, and they hired Glenn Sather and brought in pretty much the whole Edmonton crew with Mark coming back. And after my first year, Glenn hadn't hired me, and so Glenn called me down to his office, and I always remember he said to me, "Scotty, I'm not firing you, I'm just not rehiring you," which in hockey speak is basically I'm going to give you a good reference if anybody asks me. You're not in our game plan right now.
Yeah.
And so I was able to recuperate and find a job with the Canadians. It happened that the job that I really wanted 3 years earlier was the Canadians job, but there wasn't a position there. And in the interim, while I was gone, they hired another guy, and they got up to I think 2 years in a row, over 500 man games lost, and were really struggling. And so they were looking for a new S&C coach, and I knew they had therapists there. In fact, they had therapists for the team. I had been the SAT of him. I think everybody here or most of the people in your call are athletic therapists, so maybe what an SAT was. I don't think they have them anymore, but
phased them out. Phased them out.
Yeah, phased them out. But I was his SAT, so we were good friends, and got the job with the Habs and started working. Went back to Montreal and worked there for 8 seasons. My first season in the league, first week, or in my first season with the team, was the year of 9/11. So we had 9/11 happen in training camp. Always remember it was our first day of training camp. It was testing day, my first testing day with the team, and I had just come from living in New York. I actually have pictures of myself in front of the Twin Towers 2 weeks before they got knocked down. Watched them come down on TV, quite a surreal moment for me. And then started working, and Saku Koivu got cancer, and I spent my first year with Saku helping him rehabilitate and come back for what was an amazing return, and then spent the next X number of seasons with the team, and finally left hockey. Again, coming back to that point, the shiny red car, like I think I knew why I was there in the beginning, but I started to lose sort of connection with my joy of being there. I couldn't really be the change agent that I like to be, and I couldn't really make things move the way I wanted them to. So I had other opportunities outside to work with some Olympic athletes, and so I explored those and left the league. But it was a really cool time. Got to do a lot of neat things. Got to build and design the gym for the Canadians when they built their training facility, which was a epic opportunity that, I came from roots of working at Concordia University, where I had an 800 square foot gym for 275 athletes, and I used to run beer bashes once each semester to raise money so I could take cash and buy metal plates and build the gym. So I've done it all when it came to that side. So it was fun to spend somebody else's money to build a state of the art gym. So that was my hockey life.
Yeah. And you bring up some more really, really interesting points and a lot of depth to some people listening in and to me certainly. But in sport, you talk about pro sport, and it's very transitional depending on who's at the top in terms of the GM, right? As soon as a new GM comes in or a new coach comes in, it tends to be that person's people come with them. And it's not a matter of getting fired or not doing your job well or not being a good person. A lot of the time it's just because, hey, we got to bring in people that we know. And this is kind of the way it goes in pro sports. So another thing to be really wary of going in is there's I don't want to say, I guess politics we could say everywhere you go, but definitely in pro sports as well. And then you talk about sort of your trail and your journey and how you ended up where you are now. Network and timing is huge too, right? Like you got to meet people, you got to talk to people, you have to be aware of what your interests are and who else holds those interests, but also challenge those interests by talking to people who don't necessarily always agree with you, right?
Yeah, I mean, network is probably one of the most important things for all of us to recognize. It's probably something I didn't recognize early enough in my career, to be honest with you. I wish you might ask somebody the question, what are their regrets or what would they change? I think if I could change anything about my early career, I would have been less interested in being responsible right away, and maybe spent a little bit more time traveling, earning some income and going and checking out, this place or that place or this professional or that professional. And, my network has really grown more in the latter stages of my career than it did in the earlier stages of my career. And that being said, I come from a generation where there were less opportunities to go and connect with people, because it really was, an open canvas period. When I started out, like probably most people don't know this on the thing, but I'm probably the first strength conditioning coach ever hired full time at a Canadian university, and that's back in 1990. So, it wasn't really something anybody was doing back in those days, especially in Canada. So you didn't have a lot of examples, and the network was very, very small, anyways. But I think nowadays, I had a great conversation with Jazz Ranwana from Altus, who's a Canadian, and when he talks, his career started about, it was funny because he sent me his birth date, and it was July 4th, 1983, which was the year I graduated from high school. So he's a little younger than me, and it comes in a different generation of professionals. He's very good at what he does, but he came at the time where I think the opportunity to go and spend time with, Charlie Weingroff or, a Gray Cook or, these guys were more available. Still, you could have the chance to go and sit down with Stu McGill and hang out with the guy and things like that. That has become probably more difficult to do now because everybody's, so busy and there's so much going on. But I think if I would recommend anything to anybody is to really broaden your horizons, is to not be in a hurry to get too responsible too quickly, and spend some time really networking, connecting with a lot of people. And that's one of the things that's really advantageous about right now, and what you're doing as an example. This period of time with this COVID craziness, the opportunity to sit in on, conversations, to ask questions of people you would not normally really get to sit down and chat with is spectacular. I mean, even for myself, who I think I have a pretty solid network at this point, but the ability to be able to sit down with and have 4 or 5 of the world's best of something come together and chat for an hour, couldn't make that happen 6 months ago because nobody's schedules would have dovetailed. So it's a very unique time in our lives, a very difficult time, but it's also a very unique time for exploration of network and connection and exposure to other people and thought.
Yeah, and opportunity in a time of chaos for sure. In a certain light, there's some realities to it as well, but definitely, and that's one of the things. You talk about timing, and you talk about networking, and you talk about opportunities to speak with people. This is it for me, and this was the MO behind it. Is I didn't realize the depth of my network until I started having these conversations and asked a few people, would you be interested in chatting? And to give everybody an idea of this in terms of asking Scott to come on here, like Scott does this with his podcast. He has the reconditioning obviously up and running, the Zoom labs that you're running now on Wednesdays. Plus you have the International Hockey Performance Summit coming up too, which we'll talk about briefly as well, not to plug it, but just because I think it's an amazing array of speakers that you have access to as well. But I would say probably it's 2020 now, 3-4 years ago, I wouldn't have had any right, or not right, but I wouldn't have even considered asking you to be on, and so this has come sort of later on in my career, and the opportunity has been, just to take the time to have a discussion and have a chat when the opportunity presented, not to be overbearing. And Steve Lidstone was on last week, and he said a lot of people now are just reaching out and saying, like, can we hang out? Can we have a discussion? But not to be overbearing. We know that people's times are divided and doing those things. But yeah, networking, growth, awareness of where people are and what they're doing is huge. And Scotty, again, man, really appreciate you being on. I know you got bedtime going on. I know it's getting dark behind you. I know that red wine is probably just like, you need to get to the bottom of the bottle, and feel free if you want to. Absolutely. Won't keep you too much. Yeah. Won't keep you too much longer, but again, I just really wanted to thank you for all that you do for all of us, and for me on a personal level, constantly looking to see what you guys are up to and to connect. And I think timing's coming up here in the next few months where I may actually be able to be in the same room with you longer than one night at the CATA conference. So maybe hang out for a weekend. And that brings me to the International Hockey Performance Summit. Really good friend of mine is going to be there. Adam Douglas, Steve Lidstone, Mike Boyle. You got Fitzy on there. You got everybody. You got Reg Grant. This is an amazing array. Did you guys sell it out yet? I didn't check last time. I
haven't sold it out. I think the format of it and the timing and things like that, with being it's a double-edged sword, because I think people, the opportunity to be able to jump into it with being from wherever you are in the world is more advantageous. But there's a certain cohort of people I think we're really looking forward to meeting people and connecting with people, which is very understandable. That's the power of a live event that you don't necessarily get in a Zoom event. So, the information is going to be outstanding, and the people who are speaking are the who's who of hockey performance professionals over the years. And I tried to really create an array of veterans, of middle-agers, and some young up-and-comers who are doing some really cool stuff. And, I'll play off the back of this and build something really cool live next year for sure. So those of you who love hockey will be back next year for sure. I wanted to pay you a compliment, actually, which I think is important for everybody to recognize is, when I walked into your classroom in Quebec City, I'd heard a little bit about you, and people had told me, spoken highly of the quality of your work and stuff, but I really didn't know you. And, I walked in and you took the time to come and introduce yourself to me. And to be honest with you, I don't really think of myself as somebody remarkable. So I was kind of surprised you even knew who the hell I was. So I'm sitting at the back of the room, and you took the time to chat and to learn about me. And, I think that's something that people should understand is, no matter where you are in your career, fundamentally, you're always interested in people's journeys. And if you take the time to come up to anybody who's, so-called veteran in the industry and just, ask them, be curious, as James talked about, everybody values curiosity, and we may not have the immediate moment of time in that circumstance, but I think we all value and recognize that that's an important part of people's personal growth. So I don't think anybody thinks badly of anybody introducing themselves or coming up and saying something complimentary about what they do. And I think you did that, and we struck a nice conversation and a nice connection, and we've kept that up ever since. So, I think the way you deported yourself is an important lesson for everybody to learn, that that's how you make connections. That's how you get to know people maybe you wanted to know, and don't be necessarily afraid of doing that,
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. That's extremely humbling to hear you say. And at the same time, I think you missed the first part of that seminar. You walked in a couple minutes late. I think I had talked about my sweaty armpits and a bunch of things that usually happen when I speak. So you maybe missed that part. But no, really appreciate that. And that's it, man. Having the conversations, and we've touched on it on different levels, but like having tough conversations. Tough on whatever level you want to interpret tough, the outcomes are always much greater with those harder conversations, even if it's an argument or something you've been thinking about that you just haven't had the balls or the guts to talk about with somebody. And that was it for me. It was like, holy cow, it was Jamie, and it was, oh, wow, what am I going to do here? And I very much just really appreciated you guys sitting through and hanging out. And since this has been somebody I can call now and talk to on a regular basis, semi-regular basis, by whatever means necessary, depending on what phone is working at what time. Yeah, I don't know. Looks nice and dark there. We got a tropical depression moving in as we move into hurricane season now. We come back around to that coming in this weekend. So I'll just caveat to that for a second. If I'm not here on Sunday, it's not intentional. It's just because the internet doesn't work, because sometimes power goes out on this entire island, but we'll work through it. A question just came in. From an athletic therapy, high performance standpoint, what would you say is the huge differences between working in the NHL with those athletes and coaches compared to working with other high performance athletes and coaches you've worked with over the years?
Interesting. Well, I think, I think what people don't always recognize about professional sport as we know it in North America, and I think it's like that in Europe as well, is that professional athletes are part sportsman, part entertainer. And there are a lot of constraints and distractions in professional sport that high performance athletes in Olympic sport or World Cup sport or those other levels, whether it might even be university sport, don't have. When you're playing, even at university, you're usually playing for the passion and love of the game. When you're playing, when you're in the Olympic world, so-called Olympic world or World Cup world, there's a deep passion. You're really not there making or earning a living. There are some very special athletes who make pretty good livings, but for the most part, you're doing it because you just simply want to experience that chance to win a world championship or to win a gold medal. And you're putting a lot of effort and work into supportive around you. In professional hockey, professional football, basketball, etc., the grind to get there is the exposure period. That's the difficult, time. But once you're there, and when you're working in the National Hockey League, there's a lot of distractions. To the point of the red shiny sports car, that is the boys and the girls in those leagues sometimes are focused sometimes about the those things, the attributes, the measure of joy and fun and stuff like that. And where you see the true professional experience that would be sort of more linked to what an Olympian does is when you get to the playoffs. Because what most people don't know about the playoffs is that the players that play in the playoffs don't actually get paid to play in the playoffs. They get paid to win in the playoffs. So you win a series, you get a bonus. You don't win a series, you don't get the bonus, and you win bonus all the way through till you win the Stanley Cup or the basketball championship or the Super Bowl or what have you. But your contract actually ends at the end of the season. So fundamentally, you get to see that kind of real play for the game mentality when you get into the playoffs. So I guess that would be the biggest difference is what they play for, why they play, their sense of connection to purpose and stuff like that is different.
Yeah, and even to take that maybe on a different angle, from my experience in baseball, I played it growing up and then got an opportunity to work in it. And what I always found so interesting now in reflecting back was the personalities are very much the same in a professional room as my 12-year-old baseball days. The left-handed pitchers are a little bit quirky. The catchers are a little bit of a little bit of like the jockey kind. The outfielders are a little bit this, a little bit that. It's kind of eerie. Like they're just humans that are good at something. And the one thing that I found generally is you still have those percentages where that upper echelon of athlete are the ones that don't really stray too far from what they need to do and their dedication to what it is that they're doing on a daily basis. The middle they're talented and they put in the work that's necessary. And then the bottom is like they're talented, but they'll fall off eventually because they're not putting in the work until they get kicked in the butt and then move up a rung or two. But I've always found that really, really interesting, and it comes back around to that inverted model of like where performance coaches and therapists really should be and where the impact can happen, and I don't know, for me, that's a great question because it sparks so much internal dialogue for me. And then hearing your response just kind of echoes on a different level. So yeah, really, really deep, really, really deep conversations tonight. Just, man, I'm going to go back and listen to this over again, I think probably 2 times tonight. So don't call me in the morning. Yeah. If
I'm gonna have to jet soon because my computer is on 7% and my earphones are dying. Yeah, so you got one more question, I think.
This is it. If anybody's got one more, dial it in there real quick. I have 17, but I'm not gonna ask any of them other than. Yeah, no, I don't. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to leave you before you get cut off. And anybody else who has a question, feel free to type it in there. We can get it to Scotty eventually, if not tonight. But I'll hang on here. I'll hang on here afterwards. After Scott's gone, we'll have a little bit of a room for a free chat for anybody who wishes to stay. That's it for Let's Chat session 13. Scott, listen, man, I really, really, really appreciate it as always, man. Very humbling, very inspirational. I can't wait to have whatever we decide to have to drink, coffee, something else, whatever, in the future. I'll come your way as soon as that's possible. I'm very much looking forward to it. That International Hockey Performance Summit is up on the ReconditioningHQ website. You can get to it that way. Scotty's podcast, Leave Your Mark, always entertaining. Make sure you jump on there. This will be archived, so you can get this one as well. Man, I don't know what to say. I really appreciate all that you do, Scott, and all that you continue to do. Thank you so much for your time this evening and always.
Thank you, James. Thank you to everybody for taking the time to spend with me as well. I think your time is just as valuable as mine. So thanks for taking some time to listen.
All right.
Sure.
Thank you again.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. Good night. Say hi to everybody.
Bye-bye.
All right. Everybody else, thank you very much for your time. This has been session 13 of Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable. I am more than happy to stay on, and I will do so, but I will stop recording as of now. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.